Welcome to our community. Susie Thomas with you this morning. So happy to welcome Todd Biss from Young Life. Good morning.
Good morning, Susie.
Todd, we've known each other a while, and then it was fun to find out we've had this Young Life connection.
Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit. First of all, Young Life's celebrating a big birthday this year.
Yeah, 50 years in Stark County, so we're super excited about that.
Okay. Excited and mortified when we find out I was in on the beginning. So that is a little bit of a wake-up call, but so neat to see what it has meant to so many people who we were, teenagers at the time, and then seeing it mean something to our own children and now grandchildren. It's exciting to see what Young Life has meant in this community. Let's talk a little bit about the history.
Sure.
Tell us somebody might be new to town and they've never heard of Young Life. Tell us a little bit.
So Young Life, it's an interesting organization. It was started way back by Jim Rayburn in 1941. He had just come out of seminary in Texas and really felt like there were kids who would not grace the doors of a church and go through them, and he felt like we needed to have a way to get to them and reach them, and so he started this thing he called a club, and he started with about 10 kids, and they'd come around, and he would do some crazy things, sing some music that wasn't necessarily Christian music, and have a lot of fun, and then at the end he would do a little talk that kind of presented the gospel in a very clear manner and made it applicable to kids, and from that point on it really started to grow.
If anybody can see through fill in the blank of what you would call trying to be cool to reach kids, it's kids. He must have been so anointed to actually reach kids and not look like he was trying to be cool to reach kids. You want to comment on that?
Well, it is interesting. I mean, he was pretty young, and we use I use that word loosely, I guess, but we use a lot of college-age kids as volunteer leaders. Our staff are obviously older than that, and we have some leaders like John Reynolds, who's definitely up there in age, but because, this is what I've found to be true for me personally too, is when you genuinely are interested in a kid's life, they really don't care how old you are.
That's right.
When you genuinely show care and compassion and concern and interest, I learned this as I became a leader later in life again, round two, which maybe I'll get to tell you about. They warm up to you right away. They believe if you're sincere about it, they'll accept you just where you are. So
genuine
which is
is the key.
Yeah,
genuine
correct.
is definitely the key.
Correct. And it uses a lot of humor, and that's a big part for that, and clean humor, which is unusual for many high school kids these days.
Yeah, it's a new concept. Going back to an old concept.
Right.
You were a student in Young Life. You discovered Young Life yourself. What did it mean to you?
Yeah, so it was my senior year of high school, and my younger brother had actually gone to a Young Life camp in upstate New York called Saranac, which a lot of folks have gone to from Stark County. And he said, "Todd, you've got to check this out. This is amazing." And I remember being at Noble Roman's pizza shop, and all of a sudden this person ran into the glass on the outside. We were sitting at a table, and this body just slammed up against the glass, scared me to death. And I looked over, and my brother said, "Oh, that's my Young Life leader, R.D. R.D. Wilkes."
Oh my gosh.
And he was the area director at the time. I'd never met him before, and I was like, wow, this guy is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
And he proceeded to come in and sit down and have pizza with us and that whole deal. So, again, just kind of that crazy, off-the-wall sense of humor, and yeah, that's definitely a big part of it. So for me then, I didn't get to do a whole lot in high school. I spent my senior year getting more and more involved, and then that summer, RD had a conversation with me and said, "Todd, I know you play guitar. Would you consider being a leader with us?" So I jumped in the fall, leading at North Canton, which is my alma mater, and continued to volunteer lead there for 12 years.
Let me stop you right there. 12 years. So they normally use college kids to be doing these kinds of things, and then you went on for an additional 8 after that. You got your master's degree. You got your medical degree.
I think what it was that I just saw the value. I saw, I might get choked up, but I saw lots of lives being changed.
Yeah.
And I saw kids who would have no interest in anything spiritual, kids struggling with broken homes and addictions and things like that, come into a relationship with Jesus And although I was working full time, I actually met my wife through Young Life, and she was a leader as well. That helped. I just felt like I can't stop. This is too good. There's too many results that I'm witnessing before my very eyes, and some of those people are my friends to this day. Some of those guys that I mentored and worked with, back then are my friends to this day. So
it's such a revelation when you find out that Jesus is real. He's a person. He wants to have a relationship with you. And you can go through, you can be churched, you can know the scriptures, you can know and love God and the idea of God being a father, but that relationship with him is like a new step that maybe many of us didn't know before we got involved with. For some reason, he used Young Life to introduce himself to us in that way. And it's an amazing transformation, isn't it?
Absolutely. And to your point, I know a lot of friends who were church-going friends as well, who were involved in a church, but that personal relationship with Christ didn't really sink in until they had an encounter with someone in Young Life who had a personal relationship with them. I know going back to Stark County's history, in '68 was when a group of concerned citizens brought in Chuck Rosemeyer.
Say some of these names, because some people will maybe recognize some of these great names.
Absolutely. There were the Clarks and the Milligans and the Howes and the Yonleys, Wakemans, Lundstroms, Mansfield. Like, there's a whole collection in this crowd, and it's so fun because the story that I hear now, I wasn't involved at that time, but the story that I hear was when they said, "Hey, we're going to bring Young Life to Stark County," and they said, "Yes, this is going to help the youth of Stark County." And this man came rolling in, this young guy came rolling in on his motorcycle with his long hair, and people said, "What have we gotten ourselves into?
What'd we do?
This guy can't be a youth pastor."
Right.
And so it's very different, and it's kind of cool to see. There are times when I'm at camp and I see leaders get off the bus or I'll see a group of kids get off the bus and they all have a particular look or style, and then I see a leader get off the bus and I'm like, oh, that leader goes with those kids. Like, they make that connection and they see, they see Jesus, and they don't always know what it is, but they see Jesus in that leader and they're attracted to it.
Back in the day, one of the things, the fear was that this was some kind of cult. And I can remember my dad saying, no, this is good. This is good. No, it's a good thing. You're talking about a lot of wonderful names who were involved. They were all members at John Knox Church, interestingly.
Yeah.
And when you think that the pastor of that church, his father was the person who started the presidential prayer breakfasts in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
Verady. Abe Verady. Yeah. And he was the one who began that. Billy Graham one time was being interviewed on Larry King. And he said, Dr. Graham, you have influenced so many people in your life. Who influenced you? He said, Abe Verady. A man named Abe Verady. And it was fascinating to hear that. So whatever was going on in that little church really was a spark for many things, this being one of them.
Yeah. It's so cool. Let me touch on one thing real quick, Susie, that you mentioned, because I've heard that before, and we've had parents who, and I'm grateful that they do, are calling and concerned, and what is this exactly? I've heard this could be a cult kind of thing, and I heard this description that I absolutely love. They said that the way, and this was a person who studied cults quite a bit and was involved in Young Life as well, the way that you can tell a cult typically is that the first things they do are try and disconnect you from your church, any spiritual reference that you have in your life, and disconnect you from that and your family, and pull you away from your family. So pull you away from anything spiritual, pull you away from anything that is family related. And the beauty of Young Life, to me, is that it's exactly the opposite.
Quite the opposite.
We say connect with your parents, respect your parents, even if you have issues with them, and get involved. If you have a church body that you've worshiped at before, get involved. Go back and check that out. If you don't, we can give you some direction based on the type of person you are, and help. It's a big thing for us, is to help them get reconnected with churches in the community. So,
the year 1968 just rings so true. You're also talking about a Jesus movement that was taking place right at the same time. So the whole hippies turning into the Jesus people and Young Life coming into town kind of all happened at the same time. For many, they had tremendous testimonies of for many people, this would be their testimony. They were strung out on drugs, and they met Jesus, and they got cleaned up, and he presented them with a brand new life. That's the testimony of a lot of people of that ilk and that age group and that era. One thing was, man, can't you not have ever taken any drugs and still get to know Jesus and have a transformed life? And that answer you say is what?
I say absolutely.
Yeah.
Because that was me. And for me, I grew up in a family who, what I appreciate about my mom and dad's and their raising of us, myself and my siblings, is that they really showed us that it was about a relationship with Christ, and it wasn't about just religion. They weren't tied into or locked into any specific denomination, but they really said this is about a relationship, and they showed that love of Christ to us every day. And I think for the most part that helped us all see, wow, this is a direction we don't necessarily want to go. It doesn't negate or devalue our story, because forgiveness of sins by Jesus Christ is the most amazing story ever. Some things just become a little more dramatic when it involves drug abuse or things like that. But the reality is, being forgiven of sins is just as amazing, no matter who you are.
Whatever your story is, it's a valid story, and
Absolutely.
it's a praise story.
Absolutely.
It's interesting and amazing that it was welcomed into the public schools. You're talking about a faith-based organization that was welcomed with open arms 50 years ago in the public schools and continues to be a really important club activity to this day. Talk about that.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Some schools are more open to it than others. Sometimes it depends on administration. It really does kind of depend, but I actually have seen yearbook pictures where Young Life is a club
Yes.
in the yearbook, just like a ski club or chess club or anything like that. And so yeah, there are a lot of great examples of that. The cool thing is, I think that there are many principals and administrators who see, even if they don't necessarily understand the spiritual side, we would never go in and beat the kid over the head with the gospel. And this is one of the principles is earning the right to be heard. Like, it's really about building a relationship with these kids, and relational evangelism is kind of that term almost got coined because of Young Life. I've read some history on that. That relational evangelism really became a term that was used because of Young Life. And so for us, it's about being involved. And I think whether a person is a Christian or a person of faith or not in the school system, they can at least say, this has value. These young people, these volunteer leaders, these staff people coming into my school, whether they're actually in the cafeteria having lunch with them or meeting them at the football games or whatever, because we're all about going to them. It's not about coming to our thing. It's about us going to them first.
Oh, yeah.
They say, wow, to have somebody who's a positive influence, that's got great value. So I'm going to be okay with that.
I'm thinking right now, when everybody is coming together saying our young people are hurting. Last year was a horrific school year.
Yeah.
We need to find what the answers are going to be. Certainly Young Life has been invited to that conversation, I hope.
Absolutely. Yeah, especially in fact, to that point, everything that happened in the Perry community and Massillon community and others, one of the things I'm most excited about is that we have just added a staff person to Massillon the last few months. We call him Moose. Steve is his name, and he worked hard with us, and we did some fundraising, and that community has just added a staff person there, and he's so excited. He worked in the boys club there, and now is in full-time staff with Young Life. So there have definitely been meetings with churches, and there are a lot of concerned people out there. And
yes,
I'm telling you, sometimes now kids can put on such a great face because they know how. They're so good at faking things, and you probably hear this a million times, but social media can be so damaging and so detrimental.
Yes.
There's so many kids in so much pain, and the beauty of this relationship that we have with them is that we get to see that and then be there so that when they feel like they have no hope, we can point them to the one that gives them hope.
Absolutely. All right. We're talking with Todd Biss from Young Life, celebrating 50 years. They've got a big event coming up. We're going to find out more after these words. You're listening to Our Community.